Yes, we'll be waiting several more months, but we will be waiting. Minister Champagne, part of Bill C-4 will finally repeal your government's consumer carbon tax, and to this I say hallelujah. We in the Conservative caucus have relentlessly pushed for this for many years. In fact, I first pressed your Liberal government about carbon tax by asking questions to then Minister Goodale in our old Senate chamber in Centre Block 7.5 years ago. On the other hand, Minister, you have a very long history of supporting the Liberal carbon tax. Your predecessor, Minister Freeland, voted for the carbon tax at least 43 times, and I'm sure your voting record is very similar. And your pro-carbon tax quotes, my goodness, when you were asked about the cost of your carbon tax last year, you said, quote, "Canadians are proud of the Environment Minister because he is standing up for what is right for this country, while we have the climate deniers on the other side. They want to see the planet burn. We want to act for our children. We want to act for future generations," unquote. And you contended, quote, 8 out of 10 will get more money. We will fight for climate change and we will fight for our children, unquote. And last March, you told the media this: "Putting a price on pollution is, quote, the right thing to do. This is an investment in the future. The plan is working. It's going to bring more money in the pockets of Canadians, and we're going to continue to do that," unquote. Now, Minister, I want to know how much money, how many billions of dollars your Liberal government took out of the pockets of Canadians for the carbon tax you charged them for 6 years. You've been the minister for several months, so you must know the number. How much is it?
Madam Senator, I'm pleased that you have all these quotes. I mean, actually, I'll look at the answer to remind myself of all of these things that were said at the time. I would say 6 weeks have changed the world, Senator. I think these 6 weeks have seen a very different world than the one we had before. And I would say you should be pleased to see a government that when you see that the circumstances have changed, you need to change course. That's what Canadians told us. You know, we just had something called an election recently. We went out and we listened to Canadians, and I think in our democracy it's a good thing. You know, Canadians have told us that we needed to change course. Obviously, there's still concern about climate change, and we heard that from your colleagues. This is the challenge of our generation and probably of our century. But at the same time, there's different policies to achieve the goal that we have as humanity. And I think you should be pleased, and your colleagues in the House were very pleased to see that we have answered to one concern that was expressed by Canadians. And I would say, I think it's a good thing that we could realize and they say there's different policy choice to achieve the big objective we have. And we decided in this bill to make sure that in law we would repeal the carbon pricing for consumers, and I think this was applauded also by your colleagues in the House in saying this is a measure that's going to help Canadians, and it's all about affordability. You have to start from the basis. You always ask the why, or at least I ask always the why. The why is affordability. Reduce taxes, give a chance to people to get their first home, reduce also the cost when it comes to carbon pricing. And I think that suite of measure is helping our nation to be more resilient. And we have heard Canadians, and I think that's a good thing in a democracy that you listen to your constituent from across the nation, which have told us we agree that there's a bigger challenge, which is climate change, but there's different policies you can adopt. Give us a break. Give us a break now. We need that in light of everything that's happening in the world now.
Well, I certainly look forward to receiving the actual number from you. Perhaps you can consult with your officials and get back to us with that. But according to an April article in the National Post, quote, the total your government collected over the length of the carbon tax program comes to $44.9 billion, unquote. Wow, $45 billion taken out of the pockets of Canadians over those 6 years. And during that time, and not just for 6 weeks, but for a considerable period of those 6 years, millions of Canadians struggled as they lost their jobs or their small businesses during COVID and have suffered with the skyrocketing cost of living in Canada during an affordability crisis. So, Minister, your Liberal government steadfastly and self-righteously at times backed the carbon tax for years, pushing it on Canadians who couldn't afford it. So why should Canadians trust that about-face now?
Well, Madam Senator, I would say when it comes to affordability, your colleagues in the House have voted against every affordability measures we presented for the last decade. And I think Canadians have noticed that in the last election because you voted systematically against all the affordability measures we presented, whether it was about childcare, whether it's about the National School Food Program, whether it was with respect to the disability legislation that we presented. So I think when you look at the record of the Liberal government over more than a decade, when it comes to making sure that we would have the back of Canadians, whether it was during the time of COVID or after, I think that our records speak for itself. And I would say, sadly, that your colleagues in the House have voted for about every single measures of affordability that we presented in the House. And therefore, I think it's good that now everyone is supporting this bill. It's a step in the right direction. But if you want to quote, you should look at both sides, but you would see that your colleagues have voted for about every single affordability measure presented in the House over the last decade.
Well, $45 billion of carbon tax is a lot of affordability measures. Minister Champagne, I'll move on since you just mentioned disability. I want to go back to that question. And another part of this Bill C-4 provides for a modest 1 percentage point income tax cut, but this measure in your bill has the perhaps unintended consequence of also reducing the value of the disability tax credit. As Inclusion Canada has stated, the costs of living with a disability don't go down when tax rates fall. These disability advocates want an amendment to Bill C-4 to protect persons with disabilities from this sizable reduction to funds that are essential to them. The National Disability Network has written to you about this and told you that without this amendment, quote, those who face the greatest financial barriers stand to benefit the least from this policy and in some cases will be worse off, unquote. And I did listen closely to the answer that you earlier gave to Senator Petitclerc on this issue. And I note that in that letter that they sent to you, the National Disability Network provided you with several examples of situations where persons with disabilities will be negatively impacted by the reduction of the disability tax credit, even with that modest income tax cut factored in. So, Minister, the National Disability Network has proposed a concise technical amendment in that letter to you. Will you please use this amendment and fix your Bill C-4 to help persons with disabilities?
Well, thank you, Senator, because that's a very important question. And I want to say, and I want to thank also the Senator who asked that question before. I can tell you in the analysis that was done by Finance Canada, you have to look at the net of these two. And the tax reduction that they will receive by the tax cut will outweigh the reduction in the value of the non-refundable credit that would be received. That's why I say the vast majority will be better off. We're very conscious of that, and that's why we have looked at this issue very carefully because, like you said, we were seized of this issue that was mentioned, and the official that Finance Canada have run with our tax policy people to make sure that what we have, like I said, I don't want to quote percentages because it's always dangerous, but it's the vast majority of the 4.5 million of people who receive the credit, the disability credit, that will be better off, because if you look at the net of the two, they come out, on the positive side of that. So that's the analysis that we've been conducting.
So with that analysis, then you just said that $4.5 million or more million people receive this disability tax credit. What is the, as you say, very small percentage who will be negatively impacted? You must know what that number is.
It's not even a matter of percentage, I can tell you, and I'm very upfront with you, Senator. I did ask that question very pointedly to the official. You would have to be in a very unique tax position in order not to benefit from the measures when you combine them together. You would have to, and I can have the officials respond to that if you want a more fulsome answer, because we really looked at that with our tax policy colleagues, and you would have to be in this unique situation that you would have more tax credit that would outweigh that, but it's, they would say that would be a unique circumstances. But if you want, I can ask the official. We have the expert with me, so if the expert wants to take the stand, you're more than happy to answer that question if you want. I'm happy. It's up to you, Senator, or the chair.
Do I have more time or not really? Apparently, I don't really have more time, but I would specifically like to know the answers, given those examples that the disability tax, the National Disability Network provided in that letter, if they could specifically address those examples in written form, perhaps, that would be sent to us.
We'll respond to that letter. We'll respond to that letter and provide you a copy.